See this logo here? You can find this logo on YouTube Music, or go to my channel, the JTF Film Podcast, go to the podcast icon or playlist icon to see more podcast episodes easier. Welcome to the JTF Show Podcast. Now, here's your host, JTF. If I sound a little bit different, I have a fever blister and I'm having something to kind of take care of it a little bit. So if I sound a little bit different, that is why, basically. And before we really get into it, I just want to kind of address something that I saw from Twitter, but still there's important people on Twitter, obviously. Let's say our instance for like random people on Twitter. And I'm not really talking specifically about any official or anything like that, so if it sounds familiar, the big one was from the mayor of the recent Minnesota shooting, of what he said about prayers. He has clarified what he said. For me, as a Christian, he's grieving. He has the right to believe how he believes. Which was kind of what it seemed like I saw was very troubling. It was literally the same day, basically right after the tragedy itself. Mainly what I got was screw thoughts and prayers. So just straight up screw thoughts and prayers. Gun laws, things of that nature. Trans equals mental illness equals mass shootings, basically. Or blaming trans people or the existence of being trans being the cause of all this. Like, wow, really? Goodness. I mean, everybody knows the arguments against that, but like the point was really for me, and mainly on Twitter, I was basically saying on basically both sides, like, people have died. What are you doing right now? Like, it was troubling, to be honest. It was very saddening that people just went to, well, shoot thoughts and prayers, more gun laws, trans equals bad, all that nonsense, cultural nonsense on both sides to an extent. And I did sort of post or say, quote post some things, like if you're interested, X, Y, and Z, but I was begrudgingly saying that this is what maybe we should do regarding gun laws. So mainly I was trying to be like, people just died, like, why? And my official, basically, my official address on Twitter, basically, no posts, no quote tweets, just me actually just posting. Basically, I do not care about all of the arguments people have just died. Of course, now, I think we can really talk about, okay, why did this happen? Why? I mean, there were so many. Sadly, it's the same old. There were so many signs about this person definitely needing help, and not necessarily because they were or were not trans. Don't want to get into that. It's like, really? And somebody who I definitely disagree with morally, but he did have a point a little bit. Again, it's like the take I agree with, not the person who took the take, in a sense. Destiny was like, FBI, why didn't you see this coming? Why didn't you do anything about it? Because they were busy of doing not their jobs. And that's what it looks like. I don't know if that's fully true or not. And again, at the time of this recording, it'll be like at least a week-ish or so. Most likely not a week necessarily, but it would be the next week in a sense. So, as the story developed and all those things. But like, really right after, I'm like, what are we doing? What is wrong with you people? I know it's Twitter, I know it's X, but still, like, goodness. And since X is very right-wing, I expected maybe not what I saw, but I follow basically everybody from the political spectrum, from left to right, sometimes far left or far right to an extent, just to see, what they're posting, why they believe, etc. But it troubled me, to be honest. I'm like, wow, really? And it hits close to home since I'm a Christian. So it was like, wow, like, it's not like you can't talk about it because, after a murder, you gotta talk about what to do, obviously, but it's like, still, like, it was like the first thing you thought about was this. Those particular three things that seem to be the most popular thing. The fact that I had to say it like that is just, ugh. Just, I had to discuss this. Because kids are injured and dead. People are injured and dead. And those are the three things, not, we mourn or something. I did see that, obviously, but it's like, wow, right after, huh? You could have waited at least a day after, at least. At least that. Which, even then, I might still have a problem with. Like, seriously. Like, it's just. But let's get into the general episode of what this is supposed to be. And I'm gonna kind of skim through the big first chunk of Ben Shapiro's episode, specifically episode 1258, 4 years ago. Because mainly it's talking about COVID, and I basically, if you have seen comments from me, you basically know my stance on that, basically. But to kind of paraphrase my notes here, basically, the argument from Ben Shapiro on this particular episode of his podcast was the sort of the masks were off regarding the lies and propaganda of the left and mainstream media and the Fauci and all that stuff. And for me, most of this stuff seemed to be misunderstanding. Or not misunderstanding, because maybe the mask is off for you, Ben. Maybe you're being the one being exposed here. And so the main problem with Ben's argument on some of it was basically it seemed like he didn't understand, or he does understand that he's against stuff that is scientific with his change, progress, etc., having updates and mistakes, and improving over time with facts of determining things based on the situations, etc. And people aren't perfect, you know? But I do agree that Fauci and a lot of the other people in their fields regarding COVID had terrible messaging. It did seem like they were lying, but in actuality, they weren't lying. They just did not know how to speak to respectfully the layperson, or just in general. What they really should have said is, "This is something new. We might make some mistakes. We're doing the best we can." I think they did say that, but they had a lot of authority, and it was just bad messaging on their part. So I would agree on the right on that. It was bad messaging, but that doesn't mean it was lies and propaganda and all that stuff. And I think basically when Fauci, I think in some way it looked like he lied, or basically how I put it, because if you guys don't know, I'm redoing this because sadly everything else, basically the first chunk of my podcast episode was basically non-existent when I played it, and that was frustrating. But you do what you gotta do. So I'm basically trying to speed run it because honestly, it's stuff that's way in the past. This, again, was 4 years ago, and my general take is that we had some mistakes, but ultimately we tried to do the best we can, and the right didn't understand that and doesn't understand science. I mean, honestly, the blunt of it, but still, we gotta be a little bit detailed here. At least a little bit. And how it seemed like Fauci was lying regarding, I think him wearing a mask or him not wearing a mask, or him wearing a mask. I think specifically when the guidelines said something else, he basically did something else, so it looked like he was trying to protect himself. I think since he was more likely to be infected and more likely to die from it, he just took from what he know of, and he not necessarily lied, but basically saw his particular situation, which is, again, the bad messaging. They sort of said, hey, this is not necessary for everybody, but it is for the general public. If you have something that's unique in that way, do X, Y, and Z. They did that already for hyperventilation and things of that nature. But this was still a new thing. But the right seemed like it was this line of propaganda, where the left, in a sense, were like, trust the science in a sense. And my side, and my own side, was like, they gotta make some mistakes and, things of that nature, but they're generally speaking trying to do the best they can. They basically got a lot of stuff right. And I'm gonna talk about how the right feel like they were vindicated, but they weren't vindicated. A little bit more on that later on. But the point is, mainly with Fauci, he was trying to update, not really lie. And even if it felt like a lie, I wouldn't say it was a good lie. Again, I think he was mainly looking at himself as well, like, okay, what should I personally do as well? And I think, again, the bad messaging was just bad, so it did look like you were basically doing a conspiracy, even though it was like, no, actually, if you actually look at it, he wasn't really at all, actually. I think mainly it was him making a prediction before the CDC made the announcement of, I think, taking the mask off, because Fauci, based on observing where he was and how he was, I think, also fully vaccinated, made a prediction before the CDC. Without wearing a mask indoors, if I'm correct, getting that correctly, how was, yeah, I was looking at my comments a little bit. He wasn't lying. He was just saying he wasn't. I think I made an example, which was if the Saints were going to win, but the game wasn't over, but I still made the prediction that they would win based on who they were playing. Let's say the Jets. This was a long time ago, obviously, last season. Maybe they can. It remains to be seen, folks. It remains to be seen. Last season, but I didn't know if the Saints were going to win, but it was mostly possible. It was the most possible that they would win this game, and they did. That's pretty much what Fauci is saying. Again, this isn't lying. Basically, he made a good prediction based on the evidence that he had, which was the opposite of what the right was doing. I think Ben felt like, or I wouldn't say felt like, he thought that mainstream media and the left was trying to deny science and things of that nature, and I pointed out, rightly, that the Trump administration, the first one, denied science, was part of the millions of deaths, and still is part of possible millions of deaths via cuts from PEPFAR and the current deaths from the cuts of U.S. aid, by the way. And even the former president, now current president, Trump himself, got COVID because he didn't do the things that would prevent him not to get it. And even then, he was pretty much still saying that there's nothing bad about it. Even though he's the president, of course he's going to have some things that would defeat COVID in a sense, because he's the president. He's got the technology in a sense. Like, I think that's why they sort of, Trump's gonna die next year thing. I'm like, I don't really think so. Pray for you, not in Jesus Christ's name, amen. Not because he's a great guy, but because I don't want JD Vance, and also, I don't want him to die. Respectfully, I'm not that evil. Yeah, he's bad if not evil, but I don't want death upon him. That makes me evil. Like, I don't know, man. That doesn't really help. And again, when we think about it, JD Vance might be worse. So it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe don't repay evil with evil. Defeat evil with the good. I'm paraphrasing the scripture, but you know what I mean. I think it's specifically don't repay evil with evil, but I think repay evil with good or something like that. It might be one of the translations that might say it like that. but you get what I mean. And I think here, when I said he wasn't wrong, he was being careful, there's a difference. Again, it's a process, and it's just weird to twist this for your own narrative, but I'm honestly not that surprised at the end of the day. I think this is still talking about Fauci and Ben basically saying that he was wrong or lying. It was like, no, he was being careful. Either that or it was Jamie Raskin, which we'll get into that later on. I think here is I gave reasons why Fauci didn't wear a mask, or somebody. One of the reasons why you didn't see him without wearing. Oh, sorry. Fauci. Seeing him wearing a mask, not him not wearing a mask. Well, the first reasons why you didn't see him without wearing a mask, that's what I was trying to say, is because during that time, the President of the United States, Trump, wasn't wearing a mask. Somebody had to be a representative of, hey, wear a mask, do social distancing, and listen to the experts in science. Trump didn't do that, and I think that Fauci felt he and other people have to show the American people that wearing a mask is important, even if you're vaccinated. Because the vaccine is not a cure, but it is a sensible way, a shield in a sense. But even then, the vaccine is for you, and the mask is for other people, really. Because even if you're vaccinated, it doesn't mean, therefore, you won't have any cover whatsoever. This means if you do have it, it'll be the effects will be lessened, or you might not really get it that much, or it'll just be a cold because you took the vaccine. But it depends from person to person. But generally speaking, taking the vaccine was and still is good, like taking the flu vaccine. Things like taking the flu vaccine. That didn't turn political. I just don't know why this one was. I really don't. I really just don't. That brings me to this comment. This is what I call the political more than the safe. You see, politically, the right hates science and still do hate science, math, progress, and pretty much anything that has to do with going forward, that's woke to them. But honestly, tomorrow, woke will be something else, and yesterday, woke was something else, according to the right. So, take that with a grain of salt, folks. Now, in case of health, in this case, it's not an excuse to just yell at people, but I mean, why else would they be doing it in a way that seems very political? I could be wrong. I don't know about the yelling thing. I don't remember why yelling was there. I don't remember. And I think, basically, Ben had the theory, or the thought, or what he thought was the fact of Joe Biden and the Democrats and the mainstream media and Fauci all together wanted them keeping the mask on, independence of the government, even though during Biden's time the masks were off and COVID was basically over. I mean, even Joe Biden basically said COVID was over, even though a lot of people were saying it wasn't over, and I get all into that. Point is, that just doesn't make any sense, but I guess it was like, the science was just too much and they couldn't just lie blatantly, even though I thought that's what they were already doing, Ben. The math just doesn't math at the end of the day. Like, Ben, your arguments don't really hold up to water, really, at all. And this comment, I think it was true to an extent. I don't think it was all based on politics. At first, I think we all agreed 2,000 years ago that COVID was something bad at first until the right made it political. That's true. Trump was the first one to make it political. And then the left feel like they have to respond by being political about mask in the right, because the right was being political about not wearing masks for some weird reason. It just, and then they were on the vaccine because Trump did, then they were not on the vaccine because bad now. Ridley Trump was booed by his own base by saying I have the greatest vaccine of all time. They booed him, and that basically I think, basically acquiesced to the mob of MAGA, in a sense. Well, not when it comes to the Epstein files, not that, but on vaccines, yes, but on Epstein, no, definitely not, no. Sad, but true. Then Ben Shapiro showed people kind of being mad at a particular I think school teacher, I think, on C-SPAN, and they basically were like basically mad at her for some reason. I think mainly because there seemed to be the bad messaging on opening schools and reopening schools and things of that nature, and yeah, and this is basically the comment that I had with that. Because, and get this guy, I don't know what I was trying to say there, but basically, it's an easy answer. Some schools were able to progress, and others sadly didn't. At first, some schools did better on COVID than other schools. And some forms of schools, like I think the last clip that he saw was the person saying that why was private and charter schools were handling COVID more better than the public schools. And basically, that was my answer to that question. And I think I get what I say, and I get this guy, and I dig what he was trying to say, like, what's going on here? But basically, some forms of schools handled it better than others, basically. Would you like a cookie for that? It's not rocket science, my friends. Again, as a Christian, more of a better Christian, or more of a Christian now, I would not say it like that. Would you like a cookie? Congratulate! Like, I wouldn't say that to him. I think it was mainly talking to Ben on that one, but even then, I wouldn't say that. I would just say everything else besides the would you like a cookie thing. And it's not rocket science. Because people were curious, like, what is going on? Which, again, I get why the right feel like there was some weird conspiracy, but no, it's actually just, well, what conspiracy theories don't like. It wasn't orderly. It was a little bit chaotic. There was bad messaging, but they were basically saying the right stuff. And I think Ben made the claim that Biden's mandate was, I think, to I forgot specifically, but basically I corrected him and said the main mandate for Joe Biden is to defeat COVID and make unity, pretty much. He defeated COVID in a sense. Made unity, well, the right did not want unity, so he couldn't do that, but he did defeat COVID, though, in a sense of a way. And Ben Shapiro felt like that Rand Paul and the right were vindicated because they got some things and not almost everything right about COVID, and though they felt vindicated. And basically, the argument that I made, and most people have made or make now, is that the reason why you were still wrong back then is because you did not have the evidence to back up your claim. And because this is about health, you can't just basically, in a sensible way, just make stuff up and think you're in the right. And then later on, you're in the right. You weren't vindicated. You're just right now, but back then you were still wrong because you did not have the evidence to back that up. I made the analogy basically of, I think you had 2 minutes or 1 minute. It's 20-10. Same team, Saints and Jets. The Saints have the ball, like on their 30 or 40. Basically, it seemed like they basically are gonna win, and the Jets fan still believes somehow, makes the claim that seems to not be founded, that they'll still win, and somehow against the odds at the last second they win somehow. In a sense of a way, they were right, but back before how the miraculous win, in a sense, they were still wrong because it seemed quite clear that there was no way that they could win, but then later on, somehow they did win, and so that fan was in a sense way vindicated. It might not be the best analogy, but the point is, just because you made a claim that was still wrong back then, that doesn't mean when that is right now or later on, you were always right because you were still wrong because, again, you did not actually had anything to back up your claim. And so they weren't really vindicated. They were just right later on, even though they were wrong back then. That's how that works. And Ben Shapiro, I think another radical left, Jimmy Raskin, was basically saying, hey, well, why are people taking their mask off? And basically, Ben Shapiro showed a very political post from Marjorie Taylor Greene basically saying that mask is oppression, it's time to tear off the oppression, and they did a selfie with her and other Republicans on the floor without wearing a mask, and basically I said that's why Jimmy Raskin was a little bit frightened about why people are suddenly taking off their masks, especially from the GOP side, because they weren't doing it saying, hey, we take the mask off. It was saying mask equals oppression, and they were always against masks, and they were now vindicated, quote unquote. And when Ben Shapiro talked about a certain, somewhat I think also overreaching rule from Nancy Pelosi to still wear the mask, even though back then you had the good to go to take them off. I would say that still I wouldn't have done that, but given the fact of what Marjorie Taylor Greene posted or tweeted back then, yeah, I can see why maybe that rule was still trying to be in place because you still had the entire political party, the whole entire political side being so anti-mask. And if they're all of them were anti-vax. And so, I think Ben Shapiro said that all of them did have vaccinations, so okay. And I think I basically said, okay, what was the rate of their state? Because he was naming senators from their respective states, and I was actually generally asking questions, not saying, oh, because they're all the South, therefore they're not actually vaccinated. I was like, actually, I was quite curious, what was their rate? What was their COVID rate, the vaccine rate, and all those things. I was actually curious. I was actually just asking questions, not the meme, not but actually asking questions there. Now let's play some of the videos so it can all sink in.
May have heard because we talked about it on the show about this case of Andrew Brown Jr. Right, so Andrew Brown Jr. was shot. He's a 42-year-old black man, and he was shot to death as he drove his vehicle last month in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And you remember there was talk of riots. There was a big protest that was held. The family did a big presser, and they had people like Benjamin Crump there. And there, they accused the officers in this case of pure murder. And here's Benjamin Crump, who can be found at every shooting of a black person by a police officer, justified or not. He is found there explaining that it is actually just dead straight murder. Here is Benjamin Crump explaining that this was murder, and then it turns out, not so much.
Attorney Harry Daniels will put this in greater context. Exactly. Execution. Execution.
Okay, so okay, so you can hear people shouting that this was murder and that the cops need to be arrested. And Benjamin Crump got up there and he said the exact same thing. Well, now it turns out that the body cam footage has been released. So yesterday they released the body cam footage. What happened here is that Andrew Brown was a drug dealer. Okay, and they were there to deliver a drug warrant. This is all alleged, right? Alleged drug dealer. They were there to deliver a drug warrant. And Andrew Brown decided to try and run down cops with his car. So here is what the body cam footage looked like. So you can see the cops there hopping out. The guy's in his car. He starts to back up. And they're telling him to stop. They're telling him to stop. And then he tries to drive over some of the cops. And they shoot at him. Right? That's what happens. Okay, so when people say that he was unarmed, a car is a deadly weapon, right? If you run over somebody with your car, that is considered assault with a deadly weapon. Andrew Brown backs up once the SWAT team arrives to deliver the warrant, and then he proceeds to try and drive forward through the cops, which is why the DA came out and said, no, there's not going to be a prosecution. Pasquotank County District Attorney Andrew Womble said during a news conference on Tuesday that they were justified in their actions, the cops, because they had reason to believe they were in danger. Andrew Brown Jr. was fatally struck by gunshots on April 21st, according to the Washington Post, as he attempted to drive away from deputies who were executing a search warrant on felony drug charges at his home. Womble, who previously said the shooting was justified, held the news conference to discuss details of the state's Bureau of Investigation findings. Womble said Brown's attempt to flee escalated the situation from show of force to an employment of force. During the news conference, Womble recounted the events of April 21st. Brown was sitting in his dark BMW on the day officers from multiple agencies attempted to serve search and arrest warrants based on alleged drug activity. At around 8:23 a.m., a detective drove his vehicle in front of Brown's to prevent any forward movement. Two deputies approached Brown's car on the driver's side, as two others moved toward the passenger side with guns drawn as they gave commands to Brown. Brown threw down his phone as officers approached closer and quickly backed his car away from officers as one had his hand on Brown's driver door handle. That deputy was pulled over the hood of the car, according to Womble. When Brown backed up enough to the point where he was blocked by his home, he turned his steering wheel to the left toward the law enforcement officers, who were scrambling to get out of the way and yelling for him to stop, according to Womble and the video footage. The first shot was fired during this moment, piercing the front windshield of Brown's car as his vehicle continued to move. More shots followed, hitting Brown's passenger window and rear passenger side door, while his vehicle continued to accelerate across a vacant lot toward a white van occupied by an investigator. Officers fired 5 additional shots. The total time, as you can see from the video, is 5 seconds. Okay, so there are eyewitness statements that suggested that it was much longer, that these officers basically were waiting, and then they just shot him for no reason at all. But that is not true. Okay, it happens to be that in all likelihood he was trying to conceal evidence, and then he was trying to run over cops. Brown had abrasions on his body that were caused by the shrapnel, apparently, and a plastic bag in his mouth with a substance that's consistent with crystal meth. Although autopsy and toxicology reports haven't been finalized, according to the DA. The footage shared by Womble brought more questions by reporters at the news conference, who pressed him about saying Brown was aiming for officers instead of fleeing. The clips have also prompted more criticism about how authorities handled sharing information with the public. And, of course, you have people saying that the footage was cherry-picked. Okay, cherry-picked, that's the video. That's the video. And here's that we've now reached the point in American life where even the unmasking of a story as untrue doesn't actually change the story that is told by the media. It just brings further questions, right? When there's video of Jacob Blake holding a knife and resisting arrest and reaching... That's the video. And here's that we've now reached the point in American life where even the unmasking of a story as untrue doesn't actually change the story that is told by the media. It just brings further questions, right? When there's video of Jacob Blake holding a knife and resisting arrest and reaching into his car, and there being a knife on the floorboards of the car, then we are told that the cops still shouldn't have shot him. When there is full-on video of a 16-year-old girl attempting to stab to death another 16-year-old girl while shouting that she's going to kill her, that is still not enough for people. Remember that time? It was so cute when Americans were naive enough to believe that body cam footage was actually going to answer a lot of these questions. And then it turns out that people don't give a damn about body cam footage because the narrative is all that matters. But here's the thing. I think...
To an extent, yeah, but I think we still need body cam footage because we see the truth. Whether that is bad and it's systemically racist or the cop was definitely and ultimately justified in what they did. And I think it's justifiable for me to give you guys a commercial break. I think we all justifiably deserve that. Yeah, I think they do. Yeah. Yeah, I know, but it makes sense. Alright. The people, business people, the guy in suits, if you will, but, things happen. Yes, I might be old, but also not old. I'm also not young. Old, but not too old. No, I could get copyrighted. I could do that, but I don't have to. Not monetize. Doesn't matter. But what does matter is this commercial break. When we come back, I'll either A, play more Ben Shapiro's video, or get into more of my comments. I'll be right back, folks.
Alright, this is not just some sponsor or Patreon plug. It's about following Him, the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If you want to follow Him, if you want to give your life to Christ today, the prayer is in the description down below. But if you're a backslider and you want to rededicate your life to Christ, prayer is in the description down below for you too. But if you want the gift, the free gift that Jesus Christ can only give. Jesus is the only Holy Ghost baptizer. If you want to be baptized in the Holy Ghost with the evidence of speaking in tongues, prayer is in the description down below. It might be way up there, way down there in the description. Just depends on how long my description is for my show, my podcast. So, yeah, if you want to give your life to Christ, or if you're a backslider, you want to rededicate your life to Christ, or if you want the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues, those prayers are in the description down below. But if you forgot about it, or if you're wrestling with it, and you finally decide, okay, I am going to get saved, or, okay, I am going to rededicate my life to Christ, or, okay, I am going to be baptized in the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues, all of those three prayers are in all of my videos. From the first one to this one, and to the ones to come, all of those three prayers are in the description down below for all of my videos. So if you do forget, or if you are wrestling with it, and you finally decided, okay, I am going to do this, whether it's giving your life to Christ, rededicating your life to Christ, or being baptized in the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues, those three prayers are always in the description down below in every video that I make.
And we're back.
Most Americans, the narrative is not all that matters. When it comes to most Americans, they believe what they see with their eyes. And the narratives that are being promulgated by the media and by the Democratic Party they're just not true. Now, there have been narratives promulgated by the right that are not true. That happens too. But as the masks come off, the people in power are being unmasked as people who are willing to twist fact in order to achieve a political end. And you can see that in everything from COVID policy to race policy. You can see it with regard to what's going on currently in the Gaza Strip with regard to Israel and Hamas.
And I talked a lot more. Also, more so you get the sort of same type of takes from Ben as Michael knows to an extent. With that, also, I don't really have any comments about it because I was like, I already talked about it basically. I think you guys basically know my views on Israel and Palestine, or say more so like the Israeli-Hamas war, not the Israel-Palestine war, because that's inaccurate. It's not really Palestine that's fighting Israel, it's Hamas. Though Hamas does have some governance in Palestine, but it's a little bit complicated, but also simple. Again, already talked about it. I won't say I'll talk about a lot more of it, because, obviously, but again, I basically already talked about it. In this case, it seems like it's case closed. The guy who might have a drug warrant, who did have a drug warrant, because it's always about drugs. I wonder why. Pretty much tried to resist arrest, and he tried to run over cops, and then they opened fire, which in this case, until I get more info, is justified, because I think I can trust Shapiro on this. Can I, though? I don't know, you gotta look it up, folks. Since it's been so old, that's most likely what happened, or there might have been some things in there that Ben Shapiro didn't talk about, because he also has a narrative, he also has a bias. I have narratives and bias, but it's not as bad as right-wingers and left-wingers. Again, you can only see this on the JTF Show podcast. YouTube music, or just go to my channel, podcast there, or playlists, saw the logo, just saying. But, yeah, just based on what he has said, honestly, yeah, that was justified, what the cops did. But regarding drugs, I was a little bit radical leftist back then, so I do understand the radical left a little bit. But to an extent, yeah, I can get why I said that, but wrong moment there. The drug thing, yeah, I think we need to talk about the drug war, how it affected black people, how it's systemically racist, but maybe not in that time. Maybe not right there. Maybe not necessarily there. I could have just said, yeah, I agree with Ben. Move on. Won't find it anywhere else, folks. I'm just saying. I don't like Ben, but sometimes he's right. You won't find it anywhere else. Yeah. You know what I'm doing, guys. Come on. It's somewhat true. I'm just saying. I think, it's true, but
There's a battle going on inside the Democratic Party right now, and that battle is how far do they want to go in pursuit of the radical left's vision of tearing down the system? Joe Biden posed himself as a moderate. Then he got into office, and he's been very immoderate. Okay, with regard to Israel, so far, Joe Biden has been kind of shockingly moderate. I would have expected him to cave immediately to the Rashida Tlaibs and the AOCs, but the House Democrats are moving in that direction pretty damned fast. Okay, so it's amazing. The entire media will cover the battle between Liz Cheney and Kevin McCarthy, but nobody in the media really sees fit to cover the internal battle happening inside the Democratic Party on whether to embrace Hamas or whether to not embrace Hamas. And that seems like a major battle because Joe Biden is wavering, right? He is right on the line. So, for example, Joe Biden, he has vetoed, to his credit, resolutions at the United Nations to condemn Israel, which is insane, first of all. The United Nations is a garbage organization. They should salt the earth. The building should be knocked down. They should salt the earth. It's just a horrible organization. It was a bad idea to begin. It's a bad idea now. Anyway, Biden has done the right
Ben Shapiro's words, not mine, folks.
thing on that. He's mostly stayed out at this point, which is the proper thing to do when a United States ally is facing down a terrorist group. It's amazing that we have to actually say these things out loud. But Biden is simultaneously attempting to placate his left wing. So he went and he visited Michigan yesterday, and he was hanging out with Rashida Tlaib and decided it would be worthwhile to kiss this anti-Semite's ass.
Rashid Tlaib, where's Rashid? I tell you what, Rashid, I want to say to you that I admire your intellect, I admire your passion, and I admire your concern for so many other people. And it's from my heart, I pray that your grandmom and family are well. I promise you I'm going to do everything to see that they are on the West Bank. You're a fighter, and God, thank you for being a fighter.
She's a fighter. I mean, for Hamas, it is worthwhile.
I don't know about that. I really don't know much for quotes or stances on Hamas, and all those things are voting records, so I can't really say anything about that. But, like, if her grandma and stuff, that's true, then it kind of makes sense for the President of the United States saying, hey, I'm kind of with you. Hope everything's great. Pray everything's great. Yep, Joe Biden is the Antichrist or something weird like that.
Remembering at this point that Rashida Tlaib, upon entering office, somebody who went to a world map in her office and put a post-it that said Palestine with an arrow toward Israel on map. So
okay, that's bad. If she did that, that's bad. I can say that's bad.
Yeah, Rashida Tlaib is a radical anti-Semite. She has been for a very, very long time. And there is the President of the United States praising her. Well, she confronted Biden on Tuesday over his support for Israel, urging him to stop enabling a government she said was committing crimes against Palestinians, according to a Democratic aide familiar with the exchange. During a conversation on a tarmac in Detroit, where Biden had arrived to visit a Ford factory, Tlaib echoed a scathing speech she delivered last week on the House floor, telling the president he must do more to protect Palestinian lives and human rights. She, of course, does not care that Hamas is a terrorist group that is presiding over the lives of millions of people in the
again, don't know.
Strip and was about to take over running.
But sadly, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. And to an extent, if she has family there and they're kind of in grave danger, it's like, well, somebody's fighting them. It's not a great group, but somebody is. I can see that, but also, they're a terrorist group. So it's like, okay, sure, somebody's fighting them, but the person who's fighting them has the similar goals of the Israeli government. If Rashida Tlaib believes that Israel is basically like a terrorist organization terrorizing Palestinians, another terrorist group trying to terrorize Jewish people would not help her family. So if she is supporting Hamas, that's, well, stupid. It kind of makes sense, but the people who are at least fighting the Israeli government are terrible, if not worse than the Israeli government. So it's you don't win here. But it's like, I'm not in her shoes, but it's like, I might would, but it's like, ultimately, at least now, and pray if I'll never be in that situation, and big if I am, I still wouldn't go for the Hamas group of the situation, Jesus Christ, name amen, because I'll be consistent with my morals and ethics, and like, I'm not going to support a terrorist group trying to attack another, what she might believe as a terrorist group, the Israeli government. I don't necessarily think so, but I think they do somewhat terrorize, but they're not terrorists. There's a difference. Even America has terrorized people, whether it was our enemies or our allies, for good or bad reasons, but we were not a terrorist group, like the radical online left thinks that we are. And they're wrong.
Judea and Samaria areas of the West Bank as well. Meanwhile, you have the Biden administration busily pursuing deals with the people who are enabling Hamas. So at the same time that Biden is sort of taking...
It's like, it's difficult. It's complicated, at least from the right when it comes to Trump brutally kissing basically the butt of the prince. Oh, I do anything for the French. Oh, I do anything for the French. That's basically what that is a quote. What I think it's, oh, what would I do for the prince? Who, again, same country, who he said was the birthplace, if I can call it the birthplace of terrorism. Now he's just cuddling to them, giving a pride, getting a jet. That's for the military, but it's actually given to Trump, you know. It's like, I agree, but it's like, also, I mean, what do you say to that? It is something like whataboutism, but I'm consistent. Hey, like, if Biden did that, that's bad. If Trump's doing it, it's bad. But I don't think Ben's that consistent here.
Moderate position on Israel? As a broader policy position, he is not. As a broader policy position, the administration continues to pursue some sort of deal with the exact terror state that is enabling Hamas right now.
I think with Iran, I think it could have been a nuclear deal. I guess it was other stuff, but it's like, now the right's saying, let's make a deal with Iran. Let's make some deals. The deal maker Trump. Why are you making a deal with terrorists? I don't know if Ben Shapiro has the same opinion now. It would make sense that he would, since, you know, it hits close to home too as well. If I'm correct, he is not just a Jewish person, but also partially Israeli, or his family is. So I think he would be against Trump trying to make a deal with a terrorist organization, a terrorist state, which I do agree, Iran is a terrorist state. They're not just terrorizing, they are terrorists. But I don't know. I really don't know.
According to...
Comment down below if you know.
New York Times, Iran is exporting hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil each day, violating American sanctions even as world powers negotiate to lift the economic penalties and revitalize a nuclear accord that was rendered all but defunct by the Trump administration. So now, Iran is violating the sanctions, they are exporting oil, and the Biden administration is trying to cut a deal with them as they funnel that money into Hamas. It's not a...
If that's true, that's bad, that was evil, what Trump's doing is bad and evil. Quite simple.
Consistent or coherent policy, and I just don't think that Biden holds up against the left flank of his party for very long here. The Biden administration is far too focused on revitalizing a bad vision of the Middle East in which Iran is a regional power, which is why, of course, Jen Psaki at the White House was ripping the Trump administration for what's going on. Now, let's be real about this. This is happening as a result of the Biden administration deciding to make nice with Iran, and as a result of them deciding to restore aid to Palestinian terrorist groups. But here is Jen Psaki trying to blame Trump for that.
I would say that we are not following the same tactics of the prior administration. The president has reinstated humanitarian assistance and security assistance to the Palestinians. That's something that was stopped back in 2018, and we felt was not a constructive...
And if I'm correct, was stopped recently, but now Trump has seen, based on the television, bad stuff, so now he's a little bit more critical. Not cursing, critical of Israel, there's a difference.
Action by the prior administration. Aside from putting forward a peace proposal that was dead on arrival, we don't think they did anything constructive, really, to bring an end to the long-standing conflict in the Middle East.
Oh, you mean...
Yeah, that's true. If I'm correct, the peace deal between Israel and Palestine, if I'm correct, Palestine was not even in the room. Trump was trying to basically make a deal with Israel, and I think the Arab nations, without the knowledge or the constituents of Palestine, or the nation of Palestine. But if Hamas, if I'm correct, is basically kind of the main government, yeah, it makes sense you don't want to negotiate with terrorists, but, you know, oh, what you do for a prince who you said was the birthplace of terrorism. Okay.
Except for signing actual peace deals between Arab nations and Israel?
I think it's all about the Abraham Accords, which, if I'm correct, kind of somewhat intensified the sort of Palestinian Israeli conflict. It didn't really help it at all to an extent. It might help with other Arab nations, but it's like, it is a little bit complicated, but some parts of it is simple, and conspiracy theorists don't like that. They really don't.
Sure. But here's the thing. Is this administration going to continue to hold up against its own left flank? I highly doubt it. You have members of the Obama administration, who freely acknowledge, by the way, that Hamas uses AP offices as bases, explicitly fundraising for groups like Islamic Relief. Crooked Media put out a fundraiser for Islam.
That is true, and some numbers that we get are from Hamas, but I guess the big thing is it's hard to swallow. It is somewhat true. Maybe they're right about the deaths and the statistics and the relief, but they're still a terrorist organization, so maybe another way. It's like, yeah, maybe Hamas might be actually getting the right numbers of deaths of children, but they want to kill children too, so it's like, okay, they might be right on the numbers, but that doesn't mean therefore they're justified in their charter of killing Jewish people. You know, the math ain't math in there.
Relief, a group that was labeled an illegal organization by the Israeli Minister of Defense in 2014 because they were directly funneling money to Hamas.
Okay. In general, it's like, okay, I can somewhat listen to the government of Israel and their intelligence agencies, but also we all know their narrative, which is to at least ethnically cleanse, if not straight up do a genocide on Palestinians, and make a justifier via October 7th, which might justify the genocide of Palestinian people, or at least ethnic cleansing, which is bad as well.
Okay, so the sort of red-green alliance lives, and it continues to run. It's pretty incredible stuff. Alrighty, we'll be back here today with an additional hour of content.
Let's get back to some comments. I think this comment is about Joe Biden specifically, I think. But Ben, you're also twisting narratives for a political end. You're twisting someone saying something to make a political right-wing narrative. That's what you're doing. I don't know specifically what that was for, but it was for something. I don't remember, and I don't care. In a sense, why I don't care, but I think based on what you have heard, and his full video is in the link in the description below, along with a lot of other things there as well. Very important things like getting saved and how to get saved. The real political battle we should be looking at is in the Republican Party, because you got Liz Cheney's side versus Marjorie Taylor Greene's side, aka fascists versus moderates, duking it out. Kind of still today, but sadly it seems like the fascists have overwhelmed the Republican Party via some parts, and not most parts of MAGA, and it's just it doesn't look so good. But we can't let anger be fueled with violence. We gotta let anger be fueled with votes. It's gotta be fueled with the hope. It's gotta be fueled with doing good and being good. Anger, but sin not, Christians. Do good in the world, because people need it, especially now. And no party is going to save anybody but Jesus Christ. So if you're not doing well, go to Jesus, because he'll ultimately be there for you. And I think we will see this country do well and have a more peaceful and unified country. But we gotta not just pray, but also do action. With prayer, there's also some type of action sometimes. Or with the prayer, the answer is from God: do good, be a light in the world, be different from the world, be something good, kill them with kindness in a sense, show them love, show them hope, show them the faith that ultimately God is always good and he is always there for you. Whether it's tragedy or triumph, whether it's victories or failures, he will always remain good. So do good. Tell them about the good. Jesus Christ, lead people to Christ, the Great Commission. I pray that more will get saved, and we'll just have more better days ahead in general, in Jesus Christ's name. Because they will be better days ahead. I do believe that. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Hey, real quick, if you want to dedicate your life to Christ, aka get saved, or if you're a backslider and want to rededicate your life to Christ, or if you want the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking with tongues, those prayers are in the description down below.